and disregard the nonsense we've been taught, but it sure would be nice to have some tangible handles on things. And a lot of the scientific techniques that I was taught in chemistry to be tangible handles on things worked fine until they work fine in the isolation of the world of chemistry. They can't be applied outside the world of chemistry. But that's the way overlays work. So the chemistry overlay is probably pretty good. We need to figure out what other overlays are good and what overlays are not good at all. Like the political overlay, throw it away, please. It doesn't work. All
One
right.
minute.
Yeah, I see that. Well, we'll carry the conversation until Bridgette shows up, and she should be here shortly, I would imagine. I checked with her last night, and so she still knows she's on. I got bumper music queued up, so that'll take us 5 minutes into the show. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Wherever in the world you might be, right now you're on the new way. On Steampunk Radio, that's steampunk with two E's, which you can find on your TuneIn app, or on radio.co, or at steampunkradio.com, or on some nebulous mystery podcast sometime in the future. Today is the 19th of June, 2019. I'm Dr. Lenny Thyme. I'm hoping to have Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff as my guest. And we're going to start off, as we always do, with the effervescent bumper music. Enjoy. Nope, I did not cue it properly. I'm going to have to go back and cue my bumper music again because what I have here is not the bumper music that I asked for. Amazing how that works. You can do everything that you're supposed to do, and it still doesn't do it properly. Isn't that how everything works? But you know, that's because nothing works like they told us it works. Everything works just exactly how it does work, but what you think is definitely not the way it is because it never has been. So let's try again. Talking heads, take me to the river. I'm very lucky. I find rivers wherever I go. I've got a river running through my property. I'm in Northern California today. I was in a river yesterday. It's amazing the rocks we pull out of the river anymore. And when I've started looking at the rocks that I'm pulling out of the river, they look like different things that don't make sense sometimes. A lot of the rocks in the river are starting to look like fragments of human beings. And there's some people who talk of mud floods, and that the mud floods came down and drowned the giants, and that we can go through the riverbanks and find rocks that have a feel and a touch of being organs. Hearts, lungs, kidneys. If you look at the shape of the rock and the color of the rock and use your imagination, you can find that the rocks can have all sorts of possibilities, not just rock. So what would make something turn to stone? You could look at a Medusa and you would instantly turn to stone, but there must have been something in the mud floods that sort of, when buried, ended up petrifying flesh. And if you think about what petrifying flesh is, it's just a phase change. We like to think our flesh is solid, but we're really liquid materials. We're big sacks of water that are enclosed in a, let's call it a meat popsicle, where 70% of your meat popsicle is water and 30% of the meat popsicle is organic carbon structure. And so when you're dealing with organic carbon structure, you're dealing with the world of molecular biology. And molecular biology is one of those areas of study that the doctors have to go through in order to be able to treat us. But they have their medical practices and they never seem to get it right. And we're always taking treatments from them and we're never getting cured. Do you think perhaps the objective is to keep humanity ill? But that's part of the perspective of pulling the wool over our eyes and making it seem like nothing is as it seems. So if you take the starting opinion that nothing is as it seems and you open yourself to the realm of possibility, you can come up with many, many different explanations to explain how we got to where we are. But the default explanation is always the one that we learned as children. And the stuff we learned as a children remains with us until we can negate it and say, oh, it doesn't work that way any longer. And so we do that quite often. There's this fellow named Santa Claus who everybody says is not real. But, I know that Santa Claus is real. And the fact that most people tell me that Santa Claus is not real lets me know how much they believe in the illusion. Tim Allen did a movie called The Santa Claus, and the premise of the movie is that when you put on that suit, you become Santa Claus, and it takes your mind into a different realm of reality because you are now thinking through the eyes of Santa Claus and being Santa Claus. And since I have had the opportunity to put on that uniform, I know what it's like to be Santa Claus, and Santa Claus is an absolutely true being that manifests through the hearts and minds of the people who put on the uniform. I suppose that if you went around Easter and wrapped yourself in a bunny suit, you'd find the very same thing for the Easter bunny. But the way that humans deal with perception is that we think that things that are taught to us as myth are stories and can't be real, and things taught to us as truth are totally true because they wouldn't lie to us. But when you get right down to it, there's no basis for that belief, and they lie to us all the time. And they present us with so many concepts in the movies that are presented as fiction but are really true, and the presentation encourages us not to believe it so that we no longer have a handle on truth. And so then we get to the political clown act that we call politics, and none of it's true. It's all false. It's all based in a dichotomous reality that we have no contact with. But as long as everybody else believes it true, we find ourselves believing it true also, and we get to deal with the world political situation firsthand every time we deal with another person, because everything anymore has become political. And it's really unfortunate that we can't just put a smile on our face and don't worry and be happy, because anything that doesn't work works in a different way, and it really doesn't matter. Matter is matter, energy is energy, and never the twain shall meet. So you got this clown named Einstein telling you that matter is energy and it's related by the speed of light, when the speed of light's not even constant. And so they call it constant, they pretend, and we're all messed up. And so now we're trying to deal with the concept of wavelengths and vibration and resonance and structures with a constant theory of time when time is a variable. Not only is time a variable, but scale is a variable also. And time and scale as variables depend on your frequency. And so if you're doing good and you're happy and you're resonating at a high frequency, you will be doing a lot better than if people have you down and you're grumbling about everything and you're resonating at a low frequency. But every piece of information you get from this world that we call reality is set up to bring you into a lower resonance and keep you trapped in the perpetual prison that is 3D reality, which is the artificial reality that we've been given as the true reality in order to jump from here. So every time we go to a movie to entertain ourselves, it puts memes into our reality that become part of our morphology. And because every person who is my age or younger in the world today, and I'm 61, everybody from about age 70 and younger has grown up with the concept of television in the home. And once you've got television in the home, it was a whole different concept than books in the home or anything else, because now they had their audience hooked 24/7. And they used to have people who read the news, like Walter Cronkite. And Walter Cronkite was a CIA agent who was put on television, and everybody thought he was their father. I remember a lot of times as a child, I saw the people on television way more than I saw the people who lived in my family. Dad was never home. I watched a show called Concentration every day. And Concentration had a guy, I don't remember what the guy's name was. I did 5 minutes ago, but it's left me because Jeopardy used to follow Concentration. Got it. It was Hugh Downs in Concentration, followed by Art Fleming in Jeopardy. And for that hour, from 11 to 12, 4-year-old Lenny would be sitting in front of the television watching quiz and game shows. And so 6-year-old Lenny had much, much more of an advantage, because by the time I got to first grade, I knew all about what was on quiz shows and had read the encyclopedia, which most people had copies of encyclopedias, because there were encyclopedia salesmen that went door to door trying to convince people that it would be best for their kids if they bought a set of encyclopedias. And as part of the deal for buying the set of encyclopedias, every year you got an update. And so we didn't buy the Britannica. That was the expensive version. What we bought was the World Book Encyclopedia. And the World Book Encyclopedia was this bright red encyclopedia. And the first book was like A through AR. And then it went from AR to BE, and from BE to CA. And every book you had would tell you about the world. And so no matter what you wanted to look up, you could be told about the world and how it was by the World Book Encyclopedia, which was a junior version of the Encyclopedia Britannica, which was all the history of all the world that you'd ever need to know. Not. So, I'd like to welcome onto the new way my guest for the day, Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff. Bridgette and I have been talking for many, many years now, and she sees the world totally different than I see the world, but between the two of us, our perspectives are such that we can cover maybe 200, 250, 300 degrees of the 360 degrees of the circle. But there are still some places where both of us together are blind. But if we get enough people in the chat room, maybe we'll have a perspective on the whole of reality. How are you doing this morning, Bridgette?
Great. I had a really hard time trying to get Discord to work this morning. It was doing some weird stuff with the verifying, CAPTCHA verifying.
Oh, I don't even do the CAPTCHA verify. I just skip all of that. I never set it up to... I figure if somebody wants to be me on Discord, power to them.
Well, the thing is like it won't, if you haven't been on it for a while and you sign out and then you have to sign in, you have to go through that verify CAPTCHA.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, signing out is always a problem. But saying signed in anywhere is a problem too. In fact, the internet as a whole is a problem, but it's not one that we're going to solve.
I know. That is totally true. Well, how is everything going this morning? Did you get back to the AS?
Nope. I'm going to be in Northern California through the weekend, it looks like. In fact...
Well, that's...
Current plans are to spend Friday night in Panther Meadow on Mount Shasta, which is like the best place to spend the solstice. You get a good view.
Awesome.
And so today we're going to do some running around and setting up and get things all accomplished. And then I think I've arranged a ride to home for Saturday or Sunday, depending on whether the person arrives and we want to just leave, or if we want to be sociable for Saturday and take a slow trip on Sunday. But it's only a 4-hour drive, and a 4-hour drive when somebody's going to do the whole thing makes it a lot easier than the 2.5-hour drive to Ashland and the spend as much time as you need until you hook up to a ride to get the rest of the way. But, it used to be easier to get rides from people. Nowadays, everybody is leery of everybody else. And I think it's part of the way they've built the structure to pit us all against each other, so that without trust, nobody's going to pick up a hitchhiker anymore. And without trust, we're going to look at people and pre-qualify them by what they look like before we decide we're even going to talk to them. And you start talking to people like you used to, and instead of having conversations, you get growled at. So I'm at the point where I don't even try and start conversations with anybody who can't hold eye contact for 5 seconds. If I'm holding eye contact for 5 seconds, then I can pretty much tell if the person's going to be responsive or if I should just walk away. But there are some places where there are things done differently that just make the world weird. Like if anybody's ever shopped in Costco, they have all these greeters all around the place that they're just people standing around trying to make conversation with you as you're shopping. Or they're handing you tasty little treats, which isn't a bad idea. I wonder how much Costco makes by having the people pass out treats. Do they actually sell more goods than if the people weren't there passing out the treats?
I think they do because they do it a lot around lunchtime. So there's a lot of people that go to Costco and munch their way on their, hour, 2 hour break. I probably wouldn't go there an hour.
Now, I have gone there after waiting in line and collecting some food, and then we go to Costco to fill in the stuff that the food bank didn't have. And grazing through Costco, heck, you could make a movie with that title. The 2 hours and the weirdness of the people who are talking there with you. I was talking to the one guy, and he was serving up salmon patties that had to be cooked to a certain temperature. And so if you're waiting on the temperature, you have these real weird conversations. And he was telling me how he's so glad that he can do the Costco thing for 8 hours a week because it supplements his income from his own business. He owns a gun shop. But business is so bad at the gun shop that he had to go out and get a part-time job as a greeter at Costco just to make ends meet. And you figure that if an occupation can't support a single person without needing to go out and supplement their income, we're in a crazy world. But we already knew that, didn't we?
Yeah, well, you'd be surprised. We have, I got involved with, I've known Keith McHenry for a pretty long time, one of the founders of Food Not Bombs. I met him when I was in Taos. I think he's like in Santa Cruz now. I have him on my show next week. Not this Saturday, but the Saturday after. Anyway, so I don't know, when we had finally got Food Not Bombs going in Reno, I started helping out like 3 years ago or whatever else. And we basically, feed people like vegetarian or vegan meals on the river, where they live under the bridge. And you'd be surprised at how many of these people actually have jobs. And their jobs just don't pay enough for them to have a car. Sometimes, if they do have a car, they're living in it. And most of the time doesn't pay enough to put the roof over their head. And we have the largest homeless population per capita in the whole United States here in Reno. And it's shocking. It's really shocking what is happening. And people are not even paying attention. And people think, oh, everything's going to be fine, everything's going to be okay. And it's not. There's like a huge amount of, I think they said like they think like over, statistically, like a little over 1 million people are homeless on the streets. And a lot of them are also, veterans, that went to war or whatever else. And I know people have a lot of issues about, well, they chose, to do that or whatever else they're going to say. But, when they went into the military, they went in out of high school. A lot of them, it was like the best possible thing that they could do, in their small town, or maybe their family members, kind of like a routine. But, we should really, as a society, being taken care of our vets. I mean, they at least minimally should all be getting, veteran health care. And a lot of them don't even get, veterans health care.
There's a lot of messed up
of them, from because I have uncles that were in Vietnam, and they did not get any kind of health care from the VA once they were out of the military. And one of them was sprayed with Agent Orange twice. And they had to keep applying, and it wasn't until like 2013 that they actually started getting health care from the VA.
I think that things have changed enough that from the time when we were in the normal working world with quote little thingies, because I don't think anything is normal, that they've changed what has gone on, taught people different things. And I'm pretty sure that there are 7-year cycles in school where every 7 years they've changed the narrative so that every generation 14 years apart is working on totally different narratives, so that when we try and connect with each other over different generations, we have to retell the stories because the stories have the same titles with different stories behind them. And for so long, we've operated by saying a story name and everybody knows the same story. And now the stories have been changed enough that you say a word and it's a buzzword and people think about the wrong story. So my story is about chemistry, and I know a lot of the language of chemistry that was developed in the 1970s and 80s to speak in the world of chemistry. And when I use that language in the world of real people in 2019, they don't understand what I'm talking about, and the meanings of the words I use are not the same as the meanings that people interpret it. So Lewis Carroll, that famous author of the really good, I'd call it a novel, but I'm not sure how novel it is, Alice in Wonderland. The story of Alice in Wonderland is completely true and the basis set for modern society. I mean, everything you can see that Alice had to deal with is what we're dealing with today, from Cheshire Cats to Tweedledum and Tweedledummer. The Red Queen had...
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a modern story of the story of Psyche, you know, back in Greek mythology, and her trips and passages, you know, into the underworld.
Which is the same story as the Iliad and the Odyssey, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you just change the female to the male character.
Is that what we need now? Is that we should get the social justice warriors to change all male characters to female and everything will be all right?
No. There was this really great...
In Hollywood in the Marvel Universe.
Yeah, well, that's, you know, everybody kind of believes in the Marvel Universe, that it's real. I mean, a lot of people, but there used to be this, I have a whole bunch of books in storage from a guy named, he was a Jungian student, I believe.
What was his
name?
name?
On his whole other branch of psychology, kind of weaving mythology into, you know, daily life.
I didn't catch the name.
Robert Johnson.
Oh, Robert.
He wrote a whole bunch of books, and he was phenomenal. How he really kind of pulled it together so people could kind of understand. You know, I think it was called, like, one book was called We, one book was called He, and one book was like She, and then he had some other ones that had some other different kinds of titles. But I read those a long time ago, like 20 years ago. And he's been dead for quite a long time, but they're pretty power-packed books, and they're super, you know, thin books. You know, it's not like a giant book that you have to read. He really put it all kind of into simple forms about the processes, you know, that the psychological journeys that we go through based on, you know, mythological stories that we were told, and how that kind of relates to our reality.
Yeah, they tell us that we're all supposed to be on a hero's journey, but I think that out of all the mythology I've heard, the only one that resonates with me is the Cassandra story. I know what's going on and nobody's going to listen.
Yeah, well, the thing is like, I was listening to a guy yesterday because, we're having like, regardless of how people feel about Trump or whatever else, last year in August, Trump was tweeting, emergency preparedness, emergency preparedness, emergency preparedness, and nobody listened. And it was based on him having the government do a study on, how stable the power grid in the United States is, and it turned out that it's really bad and it's super unstable.
Nah.
So So it turns out emergency preparedness is, that you have to figure out how you're going to have 6 months of electricity and 6 months of food and 6 months of water. I mean, these are like the basic, staples that you really need to kind of have figured out. And so now we have all these, blackouts going out, like power grids going down, and Argentina.
Oh, heck.
Figure out why the power grid went down.
The power grid went down in Oz 6 times this winter. I was out for over a day one time. It's already here.
I think a lot of what's going on, a lot of it is right now is, hacking. You know what I mean? It's so easy to hack stuff. You have smart hackers these days that can literally take down power grids. And so I think the war between the countries now that's going on is a technology war. It isn't.
Yeah, and
Armageddon isn't going to be people being wiped off the planet with nuclear, but I think it's more a technology kind of war, and we can take your power grid out and whatever else. And so the thing is like, a lot of countries have a lot more stable power grids than we have. I mean, ours is like mishmashed together.
Well, wasn't the whole world rebuilt in the 1950s, except for the United States? Because we happened to bomb the heck out of it in the 1940s? But while we're on this topic, we should definitely plug When Technology Fails, written by Matt Stein, which is essential book on the shelf for everybody who's a prepper. And Matt's no longer with us thanks to some shaky dealings by some people who appeared to be different than they really were. But, that's the way the world works, and I don't think we die. I think we walk in different circles, and I'm convinced that Matt's time here was time to go at the time he left, because he figured out something that if he had been able to tell enough people, they wouldn't have been able to keep the control system, and we're that close to being able to have a different control system. But every time somebody gets close to being the keynote of change, there's something that takes that person out of the system. It's almost like having a combination lock that has 5 digits, and 4 of your digits are right, but you don't have that last digit yet to get it all to open, and the lock just isn't there yet. But the tumblers are all in the right place, and it's close. So pretty soon that lock's going to open, and the floodgates to the near-term future are going to be wide open. And how people deal with that, it won't be good, because people don't know how to deal with things in a good way. They get freaked out and worked up.
That's why that guy, did you get the chance to listen to that guy, Valerie Varvo?
The guy who was on your show last week?
Did you listen?
I saw that you posted it, but I didn't get a chance to listen yet. Is he saying the same thing as I'm saying? Because we have never talked, and if he is...
He said Russia's already made the turn. They have all the solutions for everything, and he's been part of it, building new technology based on ancient technology, which is changing all the frequencies to everything.
Good.
It'll literally blow your lid off, like what he talks about. He's going to come back on August 24th. And it's funny because I didn't watch it, but I saw he did a show a long time ago with Carrie Cassidy. And
that's interesting.
People know how I feel about Carrie Cassidy, but she's like a total fraud.
If you had never gone through that period where you knew Carrie Cassidy and got involved in that, you wouldn't have had the depth to understand how really bad it has gotten. Because it's people who are out there who are trying to do good things, who are compromised in what they do by things so ridiculous that they don't even see it in their own persona. They perpetuate a myth with their life because they're cut out into a non-player character form that they just go as an NPC. And the one thing you can always be sure of is if you go to Project Camelot, Carrie still acts like Carrie Cassidy. She doesn't change. It's always the same person interviewing different people in the same way with that same piercing attitude that, oh, I found a little tiny mistake. You must be completely wrong.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing is that, there's a guy who's creating a documentary who's totally exposed her and exposed a lot of her guests that have come on that are complete frauds as well. But back to Valerie, he's a pretty amazing guy. I mean, he worked for the Russian government, I think a consultant or something like that for UFO stuff. And then he had like an experience, and then it kind of opened the door, and he started reading. I think he's kind of a scientist as well. He's involved with the Russian Scientist Academy or something. And so he started reading all of these ancient texts, and then he started going to the areas of the world, kind of where these ancient texts, come from, and studying these, areas. And what he started to realize, like, there's all this technology. And then I don't know how long he's been at it, developing the technology. But he said that, they've, in Russia, they've already figured everything out. Everything's their whole, they've already moved the paradigm. It's already a done deal. And it's interesting because I'm Russian, and so we talk a little bit about that because I didn't really know that I was Russian until I was like 16. And then, all these things got uncovered about my life and my family. And so we were talking about that and about how, in American systems, we, have been told Russians are bad and this, that, and the other thing. And I said the only thing bad about Russians is that they're brilliant. They're not contaminated like we are, and so of course they wouldn't want, any of the Russians talking to the Americans and that information and that data being, downloaded into American society.
In fact, the American society is not at all what it seems to be. And the more I watch it, the more I just look at it and say, okay, we can almost take this as completely false and work from that premise, because taking it as completely true just leaves into horrible spinning in circles.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the one thing is, like, I'm really glad that, I got to do things like biodynamics and went to the school in Steiner and studied a lot of other stuff, related to Steiner, because Steiner's information was not American, and
so,
a lot of the people that I studied under, came from other countries and still are kind of, stringent about certain kinds of Steiner information, especially with like biodynamics.
Can you talk a little bit more about Steiner and who he was, the time that he was in, the people he ran around with, and the mysterious circumstances of his death in maybe 5 or 10 minutes?
Well, I mean, he was phenomenally educated. His whole thing was nutrition. And it was all about nutrition. I mean, one of his favorite quotes, it says something like, if you continue to eat from, unhealthy soil, you will be trapped in the prison of your body. You won't be able to reach spiritual heights. You won't be able to do anything because you're, basically, in health. your body starts to ache, it has pain, it doesn't function well. This is a hands-on world. I mean, you have to, being human, you have to go out and you have to touch it and feel it and smell it and participate in it, and that's how you move up spiritually or energetically. I mean, if you can't sit and meditate and hold some kind of meditation thought because you're fighting your body, I mean, it's going to be really hard for you to reach certain kinds of levels. And the other thing too is people don't forget is that DMT is the doorway, right? It's the doorway that you enter to God. It opens up that doorway. But we have natural occurring. We have DMT transmitters, in our bodies and our brain, and it's from the food. Green leafy plants that are fresh, that you pick out of your own yard and you eat raw, give you DMT naturally, right? That feeds those transmitters in your brain that basically keep that doorway open to God, if you will, or whatever, that doorway open to information and data. This is kind of like how I look at it. And so people, you can't just eat green leafy plants because, if you're at the grocery store or you're even at your co-op, your local producer, pretty much everything either loses all of its nutritional properties 3 days after it's picked, or it's lost half of them 3 days after they're picked. So your green leafies lose all their nutritional property 3 days after they're picked. So you're not getting anything fresh. This is why